In 1729 BC, the region of Canaan was a collection of rugged pastures. Here, Jacob lived as a nomad, a foreigner moving massive herds of sheep across lands he did not own. Jacob's household was structurally complex, having children with 4 different women, including servants Bilhah and Zilpah. This created a dominant group of older half-brothers. Joseph occupied a unique, precarious spot, the son of his old age, born to his favored wife, Rachel. To make this preference clear to everyone, Jacob gave the 17-year-old a distinctive, ornate coat. It was a visual broadcast of status, separating Joseph from the brothers who performed the manual labor of the family business. The response from the older brothers was immediate. Seeing their father's bias rendered in such a physical way, they found it impossible to even speak to Joseph with basic courtesy. The coat was a gift to a son, but it acted as a wedge for the family. Jacob had taken a standard case of sibling rivalry and turned it into a permanent, systemic divide within his own home. Joseph's daily presence soon began to grate on the older brothers. It started when he acted as an informant, bringing back an evil report of his brother's conduct in the fields to their father. This was compounded by the daily friction of Jacob's behavior. The brothers had to live in a camp where their father's favoritism was public and unapologetic, reinforcing their secondary status at every meal. Then Joseph shared his dreams. He described a field where his brothers' sheaves of wheat gathered around his own sheaf and bowed down to it, a direct prediction of his future rule over them. For the brothers, these 3 elements, the reporting, the favoritism, and the dreams, created a volatile psychological environment. Their annoyance had transitioned into a collective, hardened malice. Joseph was no longer just a favored younger brother. His words and his father's actions had positioned him as an active threat to the brothers' future inheritance and authority. The opportunity for the brothers to act finally came when Joseph was sent to the distant pastures, miles away from their father's protection. When they saw him approaching in the distance, their first impulse was lethal. They conspired to kill him on the spot and discard the body. The plan shifted, however. Instead of an immediate execution, they stripped him of his coat and threw him into a dry pit, deciding to let starvation do the work for them. When a caravan of Ishmaelite traders passed by on their way to Egypt, the brothers saw a different opportunity. They pulled Joseph from the pit and sold him into slavery for 20 pieces of silver. To hide what they had done, they dipped Joseph's coat in goat's blood. They brought the stained garment to Jacob, leading him to believe that his favorite son had been torn apart by a wild animal. Joseph, meanwhile, was taken to Egypt and sold again, this time to Potiphar, the captain of the Pharaoh's guard. The ruin was total. In a matter of days, Joseph had gone from being a royal heir in a multicolored coat to being a piece of property in a foreign land, stripped of his status and his freedom. The brothers had successfully dismantled their father's plans, effectively erasing Joseph from the family and securing their own place at the top of the hierarchy. While the brothers returned to their lives, Jacob fell into a state of absolute paralyzing grief, convinced that the best part of his future was gone forever. But the narrative suggests a different logic at work. This story follows a movement where a person is forced into a deep, painful lowering of status as the very means of a later rise to power. This chart shows that the descent, the pit, the betrayal, and the slavery is not an accidental tragedy. It is the path that places Joseph exactly where he needs to be in Egypt for his eventual climb to the throne. This same sequence of profound rejection, followed by restoration, is later mirrored in the life of Christ. It frames suffering not as a failure of the plan, but as the mechanism that makes the eventual glory possible. The final paradox is that the brothers' attempt to destroy Joseph became the very thing that saved him. Even the most destructive human acts were used as the raw material for a much larger restorative outcome.